Two poor girls beg for medicine in a luxury pharmacy, but are mercilessly thrown out. A well-dressed man witnesses the scene, and without knowing why, decides to help them. This simple gesture leads him to a shack, and eventually to a reunion with a son he believed dead. If you were moved by this beautiful story of love and overcoming adversity, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Now continuing, the morning sunlight streamed through the immaculate display windows of St. Raphael's Pharmacy in the heart of the Upper East Side, one of Manhattan's most elegant neighborhoods. The scent of imported perfumes mingled with the chilled air conditioning, creating an atmosphere of comfort reserved only for those who could afford it. The shelves gleamed with exorbitantly priced beauty products, vitamin supplements in sophisticated packaging, and cosmetics that cost more than many families earned in an entire month. It was Tuesday around 10 o'clock and the foot traffic was still light. A few ladies in designer clothes browsed magazines while waiting for their custom compounded medications. A discreet security guard in a dark suit watched the entrance with a trained eye. It was into this scene of calculated tranquility that two young girls walked through the glass door. They were a complete contrast to the surroundings. The older one, who appeared to be about 12 or 13, wore a faded t-shirt and mended shorts. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her feet were clad in worn-out flip-flops. The younger one, who couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, held her sister's hand tightly, her eyes wide at the sight of so much luxury. Her clothes were also simple, washed so many times they had lost their original color. Both had sun-tanned skin, hands calloused from working at a young age, and an expression of urgency on their faces that drew attention. The clerk, a middle-aged woman in a pristine white uniform and perfect makeup, looked up as the girls approached the counter. Her gaze quickly scanned. Their appearance and something in her expression shifted. It wasn't overt disdain, but a professional coldness that made it clear these children were not the usual type of customer. Lucy, the older one, swallowed hard before speaking. Her voice came out shaky but filled with determination. "Please, we need some medicine urgently. It's for a very high fever. We have the name written down here." She held out a crumpled piece of paper on which the name of an antibiotic and a fever reducer was written in crooked handwriting. The clerk took the paper with her fingertips, as if afraid of contamination. She read it quickly and handed it back. "These medications require a doctor's prescription. Do you have one?" Lucy felt her heart sink. "No, we don't. But it's a real emergency. There's a boy who's really sick. His fever is dangerously high, and he fainted. We really need this medicine." The clerk sighed with impatience. "Without a prescription, I can't sell it. It's the law. Besides, these medications are expensive. Do you have money to pay?" Amanda, the younger one, squeezed her sister's hand tighter. Her eyes were already beginning to well up. Lucy opened the small cloth bag she was carrying and took out a few crumpled bills and some coins. She had gathered everything she had managed to earn in the last few weeks, selling candy outside the school, collecting cans for recycling, and helping to clean yards in her neighborhood. "We have this. How much is it?" The clerk didn't even bother to count. She glanced at it and shook her head. "That's not even enough for one of the medications. And even if it were, I already told you, you need a prescription. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other customers to attend, too. But the boy will get worse if we don't bring him the medicine." Lucy's voice rose a notch, and a few people in the pharmacy began to look in their direction. "Please, you don't understand. He could get very sick. We're just asking for help." The clerk's expression hardened. "Girls, I can't do anything. You need to leave. This isn't a place to be begging for handouts." "We're not begging. We have money. We just don't have enough, but we can work and bring the rest later. Please." Lucy's voice was now visibly trembling, and tears began to stream down Amanda's face. The security guard was already approaching, alerted by the commotion. The clerk gave him a discreet nod, indicating that he should escort the girls out. He advanced with firm steps, his hand already extended to guide them to the exit. "You need to leave now." His voice was low but firm. "Come on, without a scene." Lucy felt shame burn her face. The stares of the other customers were a mixture of curiosity, discomfort, and judgment. She took Amanda's hand and began to back away towards the door, defeated. Tears finally streamed down her own face as, well, they were almost at the exit when a deep voice echoed from the back of the pharmacy. "Wait a moment." Everyone turned. In the aisle between the shelves of imported products, a man was approaching with calm steps. He wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, gleaming Italian leather shoes, and carried a genuine leather executive briefcase. His graying temples gave him an air of distinction, and his dark eyes observed the scene with an intensity that made everyone in the pharmacy pay attention. He must have been around 45, and everything about him communicated success, power, and control. Gabriel Harrison was one of New York's most respected entrepreneurs. The owner of a construction firm that had erected some of the city's most iconic buildings, he had built his empire from practically nothing. He was born in a poor neighborhood in the East Bronx, the son of a single mother who worked as a cleaning lady. He had never known his father. He grew up facing hardships that shaped his character profoundly. He studied in public schools, worked from the age of 12, selling popsicles, shining shoes, and doing odd jobs wherever he could find an opportunity. With great effort, he managed to get a scholarship to study civil engineering, and from there he built his fortune with relentless determination. Now, at 46, Gabriel had everything money could buy. He lived in a mansion in Greenwich, had imported cars in his garage, traveled the world, and was welcomed in any social circle of the Manhattan elite. But there was a void inside him that no material achievement could fill. A void that had deepened 5 years ago when his 3-year-old son disappeared during a trip with his mother. Gabriel was in the pharmacy that morning by pure coincidence. He had come to pick up some migraine medication and had gotten distracted looking at some supplements when he heard the argument at the counter. At first he paid little attention, but then he saw the older girl's face. He saw the desperation in her eyes. He saw the way she tried to maintain her composure even while being humiliated, and something inside him stirred. It was like looking into a mirror of the past. How many times had he himself, as a child, been treated that way? How many doors had been slammed in his and his mother's faces simply because they were poor? How many times had he had to swallow humiliation in silence? He approached the counter with the natural authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "What's the problem here?" The clerk immediately changed her posture. "Mr. Harrison, these girls are trying to buy controlled substances without a prescription and don't have enough money. I've already explained that it's not possible." Gabriel looked at Lucy and Amanda. The younger one hid her face behind her sister, but the older one met his gaze with that mixture of hope and fear of someone who had learned not to expect anything good from the wealthy. "What medicines do you need?" Lucy showed him the paper again, her hand trembling. Gabriel read it and turned his eyes back to the clerk. "Get these medications. I'll pay." "But sir, they don't have a prescription," the clerk began to protest. "I'll take responsibility," Gabriel cut in, his voice admitting no argument. "Get them now." The woman hesitated for only a second before obeying. Gabriel took his wallet from the inner pocket of his jacket and handed over a credit card. While the transaction was being processed, he looked at the girls. "Who is the medicine for?" Lucy wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "It's for a boy who's very sick. We're taking care of him. He's had a fever that won't break for 2 days. Have you taken him to a doctor?" "We can't afford a doctor, sir. We tried to take him to the community clinic, but the line was huge and he couldn't stand to wait. So we asked a neighbor who used to work in a hospital, and she said these medicines might help." Gabriel nodded in silence. The clerk returned with a bag containing the medications. He took it and handed it to Lucy. "Here you go. Use them as your neighbor instructed." Lucy took the bag as if she were holding a treasure. Her hands were shaking. "Thank you so much, sir. We don't know how to thank you. When we have the money, we'll pay you back, I promise." Gabriel waved away the offer. "No need. Just take good care of the boy." He paused, observing their faces. "Do you live far from here?" "In the Bronx, sir. We took 2 buses to get here because someone said this pharmacy had good medicine." The Bronx was on the other side of the city, one of New York's most deprived areas. Gabriel imagined the journey those 2 children had made, crossing the entire metropolis in search of help. "Be careful on your way back." "We will, sir, and thank you so so much. You saved the boy's life." Lucy took Amanda's hand, and the two of them quickly left the pharmacy before anyone could change their mind. Gabriel stood at the counter for a moment, watching the girls disappear onto the busy sidewalk. The clerk handed him the receipt, but he barely glanced at it before putting it in his wallet. Something about that encounter had deeply disturbed him. He couldn't get the image of the desperation in Lucy's eyes out of his head. It was the same desperation his mother had surely felt so many times when he was a child and fell ill. He finished getting his own medicine and left the pharmacy, getting into his imported car parked out front. But even as he drove back to his office downtown, the image of the girls kept returning to his mind. There was something about that situation that affected him in a way he couldn't fully explain. Perhaps it was just the memory of his own past, or perhaps it was something deeper that he didn't yet understand. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Lucy and Amanda were running through the narrow streets of the Bronx with the bag of medicine clutched to their chests. They had gotten off the bus and were now navigating the alleys they knew by heart. The sun was high and strong, but they barely felt the heat. The only thing that mattered was getting home as quickly as possible. The place they lived hardly deserved to be called a home. It was a shack made of wood and tarpaulin, erected on an uneven plot of land alongside other similar shacks. There was no proper sanitation, and water came from a single community tap that served several families. The floor was packed earth, and when it rained, water invaded everything, but it was the only home Lucy and Amanda had ever known. Inside the shack, their mother Celia was lying on a thin mattress on the floor. She was 32 but looked much older. Years of hard labor, poor nutrition, and a chronic respiratory illness had consumed her strength. Her lungs hadn't worked properly since she contracted a severe infection years ago, and the dampness of the shack only made everything worse. She coughed constantly, a dry, painful cough that echoed off the fragile walls. In another corner of the shack, on a second, even older and stained mattress, lay a young boy. He must have been about 8 or 9, though it was hard to tell for sure. His thin body was covered by an old blanket, but he was still shivering. His face was waxen pale, his lips chapped, and beads of sweat ran down his forehead despite the chills. His eyes were closed and his breathing was ragged. Celia tried to get up when she heard her daughters enter, but the cough doubled her over. "Did you get it?" Her voice came out weak and hoarse. "We got it, Mum." Lucy ran to her and showed her the bag. "A very kind man paid for us." Celia closed her eyes in relief. "Thank God." She looked at the boy in the corner. "He's worse. The fever won't break." Lucy approached the boy and placed a hand on his forehead. It was burning. She quickly opened the bag and took out the medications, carefully reading the instructions on the box. She prepared the recommended dose and, with Amanda's help, managed to get the boy to swallow the pills with a little water. The boy opened his eyes for a brief moment. They were dark, deep-set eyes, filled with a sadness that shouldn't exist in someone so young. He muttered something incomprehensible and closed his eyelids again. "Who was this man who helped you?" Celia asked, still trying to control her cough. "We don't know, Mom. He was a rich man in a nice suit. He was in the pharmacy and saw when the lady wanted to kick us out. Then he paid for everything and didn't even want us to pay him back." Celia shook her head slowly. "There are still good people in the world. God will reward that man." Lucy sat on the floor next to the boy, watching him attentively. That boy had appeared in their lives 3 weeks ago. He had simply shown up, wandering the neighborhood streets, dirty, hungry, and completely lost. He barely spoke, just observed everything with those sad eyes. Lucy had started giving him food, sharing the little they had. Then, when the nights grew colder, she had made a space in the shack for him to sleep protected. No one knew where he came from. He wouldn't say his name, didn't talk about family, didn't share anything about his past. He seemed to carry a deep trauma that kept him silent. The neighbors speculated that perhaps he was the son of a drug addict who had abandoned him, or that he had run away from a shelter. But no one knew for sure. What Lucy knew was that this boy needed help. And even with almost nothing, she couldn't just ignore him. It was something that came from within, an impulse she didn't question. Maybe because she herself had been hungry so many times. maybe because she knew the feeling of helplessness all too well. The hours passed slowly that afternoon. Lucy and Amanda took turns placing cold compresses on the boy's forehead, giving him his medicine at the right times, and trying to get him to drink a little water. Celia, despite her own weakness, prayed quietly in the corner, asking for the fever to break. As night fell over the Bronx, his temperature finally began to drop. The boy stopped shivering so much, and his breathing became a little more regular. Lucy allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe the medicine was working. Maybe he was going to survive. She looked through a crack in the shack's door, watching the faint lights of the other houses around. She thought of the man from the pharmacy, of his elegant suit, his gleaming shoes, the nice car he surely must have. She thought about how such different worlds could intersect for a brief moment, and she wondered if that man would ever think of them again, or if for him it had just been another meaningless gesture in the midst of his luxurious routine. On the other side of the city, in the Greenwich mansion, Gabriel Harrison was in his private study. The walls were lined with shelves filled with books on architecture and business. His mahogany desk held 3 computer monitors, papers organized in perfect stacks, and a framed photograph. The photo showed a 3-year-old boy with dark eyes and a shy smile. Matthew, his son. Gabriel picked up the frame and looked at the image, as he did every night. 5 years had passed since the disappearance. 5 years of searches, investigations, hopes, and disappointments. The police had concluded that the child had likely been kidnapped during the trip he took with his mother to the countryside. Some private investigators suggested that perhaps he had gotten lost and not survived, but Gabriel had never accepted any of these hypotheses as definitive. His ex-wife, Mariana, had never recovered from the trauma. She sank into a deep depression and eventually moved abroad, unable to continue living in New York where everything reminded her of their lost son. Gabriel was left alone with his pain, his guilt, and his unanswered questions. 2 years after the disappearance, pressed by loneliness and the need to move on, he had remarried. Rebecca was a beautiful, elegant woman, 15 years his junior. She came from a traditional New York family and seemed to be exactly the kind of partner a man of his position needed. She had given him another son, Peter, who was now 13, but the marriage had never been truly happy. Rebecca was vain, overly concerned with social appearances, and little interested in anything that didn't involve her own comfort and status. Gabriel put the photo back on the desk and massaged his temples. The migraine that had taken him to the pharmacy that morning was still throbbing. But that wasn't all that bothered him. It was the image of those 2 girls. It was the memory of the desperation in the older one's eyes. It was something he couldn't name, but that churned in his gut. He stood up and walked to the window. Below, the illuminated gardens of his estate stretched out in perfect order. Everything in his life was orderly, controlled, successful, except for the wound that never healed, except for the son he had never found. Why did those girls affect him so much? He tried to rationalize it was just natural empathy, it was just the memory of his own poor past. But a small voice inside him whispered that maybe it was something more, something he didn't yet understand. He made a sudden decision. The next day he would go to the Bronx. He wanted to know if the sick boy had gotten better. He told himself it was just to make sure the medicine had worked. But deep down, he knew there was something more pulling him in that direction, something inexplicable but impossible to ignore. The night advanced over New York, blanketing equally the illuminated skyscrapers of the Upper East Side and the dark shacks of the Bronx. And in both places, very different people carried thoughts that, unbeknownst to them, were beginning to intertwine in ways that would change all their destinies. The next morning dawned gray over New York. Heavy clouds covered the sky, threatening rain at any moment. Gabriel woke up early as always, but this time he didn't go straight to the office. He put on simpler clothes than usual, a pair of jeans and a discreet polo shirt, and left the house before Rebecca and Peter even came down for breakfast. He just left a note with the housekeeper saying he had some matters to attend to and would be back late in the afternoon. In the car, as he drove towards the northern part of the city, Gabriel questioned what he was doing. It was irrational. He had important meetings scheduled, contracts waiting for his signature, business decisions that couldn't be postponed. And yet, there he was, crossing New York to go to a borough he had never visited, to look for two girls he barely knew, to check on a sick boy who had nothing to do with his life. But the truth was, he hadn't been able to sleep well. The image of those children kept coming back to his mind, and with them came the memory of Matthew. His son would be 8 years old now if he were alive, about the same age as the sick boy the girls were caring for. Was it possible that somewhere, someone was also taking care of Matthew? Or had he really not survived, as so many suggested? Gabriel shook his head, trying to push away such painful thoughts. He focused on the traffic, which was starting to get heavier. It took him almost an hour and a half to reach the Bronx. The neighborhood was very different from the area where he lived. The streets were uneven, many unpaved. The houses, if they could be called that, were precarious structures, some of unfinished masonry, others just shacks of wood and tarpaulin. Children played barefoot in the street, and the smell of open sewage invaded the car even with the windows closed. Gabriel stopped at a small bakery and got out of the car. He locked the doors securely and activated the alarm, conscious of the curious glances his imported vehicle attracted. He went into the bakery and approached the counter where a middle-aged man was serving. "Good morning. I'm looking for two girls who live around here. One is about 12, 13, brown hair in a ponytail. The other is younger, about 8 or 9. They live with their mother, who is sick." The man observed him with suspicion. "Who's asking?" Gabriel realized he needed to be careful. This was not a community that trusted strangers easily, especially rich strangers. "My name is Gabriel. I helped them yesterday with some medicine for a boy who is sick. I just came to see if he's better." The man's expression softened a bit. "Oh, you must be talking about Celia and the girls. Everyone knows them around here. They're good people, hard-working. Celia's in a tough spot with her illness. The girls do everything they can to help." "Do you know where they live?" The man hesitated. "I've lived here for over 20 years. I know every corner. But I don't usually go around giving out people's addresses, especially not to outsiders." Gabriel understood the community's natural protectiveness. "Look, I just want to help. I came a long way just to see if the boy's okay. If you want, you can come with me. That way you can see my intentions are good." The man thought for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll go with you. My name is Mr. Oswald, but let me warn you, if you have any funny ideas, the people here protect our own." "I understand, and I appreciate that," Gabriel replied sincerely. They left the bakery together. Gabriel locked his car again and followed Mr. Oswald on foot through the narrow alleys. They passed through passageways where barely one person could fit, went down small makeshift staircases, and crossed a polluted stream on a bridge of old planks. With every step, Gabriel felt the contrast between that world and his own. He had grown up in similar conditions, but somehow after years of living in another universe, he had forgotten what it was really like to live like this. Finally, Mr. Oswald stopped in front of a shack distinguished from the others only by a colorful cloth curtain in the doorway. "This is it. Let me call them first." He knocked lightly on the wooden frame. "Celia, Lucy, someone's here to see you." There was movement inside, and then the curtain was pulled aside. Lucy appeared, her eyes wide with surprise upon recognizing Gabriel. "Sir, what are you doing here?" "I came to see how the boy is. Did the medicine help?" Lucy looked at Mr. Oswald, who gave a slight nod, indicating that everything was fine. She then opened the curtain wider. "You can come in, sir." Gabriel entered the shack and needed a few seconds for his eyes to adjust to the dim light. The space was tiny, no more than 200 square feet. The floor was packed earth, covered in some spots with pieces of cardboard and old rugs. The walls were of poorly fitted wood, with cracks through which the wind blew. The roof was a combination of broken tiles and plastic sheeting. In the corner there was a 2-burner gas stove on some bricks. Pans hung from nails. A small old refrigerator hummed loudly, and the 2 mattresses on the floor, where Celia and the boy were. Celia tried to sit up when she saw Gabriel, but her cough stopped her. Gabriel gestured for her not to worry. "You don't need to get up. I just came to see how you are." "You were so kind yesterday," Celia said in a weak voice. "May God bless you." Gabriel approached the mattress where the boy was lying. The fever seemed to have subsided. His face was still pale, but it no longer had that waxy tone from the day before. His lips weren't as chapped. He was sleeping, but his breathing was more regular. "How is he?" "Much better, sir. The fever started to break during the night. I even managed to have a little soup this morning," Lucy replied, standing beside Gabriel. Gabriel observed the boy carefully. Even sick, even dirty and mistreated by life, there was something in that face that disturbed him, a familiarity he couldn't place. "What's his name?" "We don't know, sir. He doesn't talk. He showed up around here a few weeks ago, all alone. We tried to ask, but he doesn't answer." "He doesn't say anything." Gabriel frowned. "Nothing at all?" "Sometimes he mutters things in his sleep, but you can't really understand. It seems like he went through something really bad." Gabriel felt a tightness in his chest. "How old do you think he is?" "About 8, 9 years old, around Amanda's age." At that moment, as if sensing he was being watched, the boy stirred slightly and opened his eyes. They were dark, deep-set eyes that fixed directly on Gabriel. For a second that seemed to last an eternity, the two looked at each other, and in that gaze Gabriel felt something he couldn't name. It was as if an electric current had passed through his body. The boy blinked slowly, then muttered something so low it was almost inaudible. "Daddy?" Gabriel froze. His heart raced. "What did you say?" But the boy had already closed his eyes again, returning to his sleep. Gabriel stood motionless, the blood pounding in his ears. Had he heard correctly? Or was his mind just playing a cruel trick, mixing his desperate wishes with reality? Lucy looked at him, concerned. "Are you all right, sir? You've gone pale." Gabriel took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. "I'm fine. I was just worried about his condition. He needs to see a real doctor, a full checkup." "We'd like to, sir, but we can't afford it," Celia said, her voice filled with frustration and helplessness. Gabriel made a quick decision. "I'll arrange it. I have a private doctor who can either come here or you can take the boy to his office. I'll pay for everything." Lucy and Celia looked at each other, incredulous. "You've already done so much for us," Celia began. "It's not a favor. It's the right thing to do," Gabriel interrupted. He looked around the shack again, truly seeing for the first time the conditions in which these people lived. "And you need medical care too. That cough isn't normal. It's my respiratory illness, sir. I've had it for years, but the medicine is expensive and the line at the clinic is huge. I get by as I can." "That's going to end up killing you," Gabriel said bluntly. "Let me help, at least with consultations and basic tests." Celia began to cry softly. "I didn't know people like you still existed in the world. You don't even know us." "I've known this situation," Gabriel replied, his voice heavy with memories. "I've been hungry. I've lived in worse places than this. I had a sick mother who couldn't afford a doctor. I know what it's like. And if someone had helped me back then, maybe a lot of things would have been different." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Mr. Oswald, who had remained at the door observing, discreetly wiped his own eyes. Lucy held Amanda's hand, both with tears streaming down their cheeks. Gabriel took out his phone and made a few calls, first to his private doctor, Dr. Henry Moore, explaining the situation and asking him to make a house call that same day. Then to his assistant at the office, instructing her to cancel his morning meetings. When he hung up, he turned to Celia. "The doctor will be here shortly. He'll examine you and the boy. Then we'll see what needs to be done." "Sir, we have no way to pay for all this," Celia insisted, still in disbelief. "I'm not asking for payment," Gabriel was firm. "You just need to accept the help. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, I know. But trust me." 2 hours later, Dr. Moore arrived at the shack. He was a man in his 50s, experienced and dedicated, who had been working with Gabriel for many years. If he was shocked by the location, he didn't show it. He treated everyone with professionalism and kindness. He examined the boy first, then Celia, and finally the 2 girls, just to make sure they were healthy as well. When he finished, he spoke with Gabriel outside the shack. "The boy is recovering well, the antibiotics are working, but he's malnourished and shows signs of severe psychological trauma. He needs follow-up care." The woman Celia is in a worrying state. Her respiratory disease is serious and is being aggravated by the living conditions. She needs continuous treatment and a healthier environment. The girls are relatively well, all things considered, but they also show signs of chronic malnutrition. Gabriel nodded, absorbing the information. What do you recommend? For the boy, psychological and nutritional follow-up. For Celia, proper medication and, ideally, a move to a place with less humidity. For the girls, dietary and vitamin supplementation. Arrange for everything, medications, supplements, whatever is necessary, and if hospitalization or more detailed tests are needed, let me know. Dr. Moore looked at Gabriel with curiosity. May I ask what your relationship is with this family? None. I only met them yesterday. Gabriel paused. Or maybe it's more than that, I'm not sure yet. The doctor nodded, understanding that there was more to the story that Gabriel was still processing. I'll send the medications and vitamins today, and I'll schedule some tests for next week. After the doctor left, Gabriel returned to the shack. Lucy and Amanda were preparing a simple lunch, just rice and beans with a few pieces of sausage. Celia was resting on the mattress, and the boy was still sleeping. Can I ask you something? Gabriel addressed Lucy. You said he mutters things in his sleep. Can you remember what he says? Lucy thought for a moment. He says random words. Once I heard him say something like blue car. Another time it was mountain or hills, I'm not sure. And there's one thing he repeats more often. It sounds like Mama or Maria, but it's hard to understand. Gabriel felt his heart race again. The car he was driving when Matthew disappeared was blue, and the trip had been to a mountain town, and his ex-wife's name, Matthew's mother, was Mariana, whom the little boy called Mama. Could it be possible? Or was his desperate mind creating connections where none existed? Does this boy have any marks on his body? Any scars or birthmarks? Lucy seemed surprised by the question. He has a small scar here, on the side of his neck. She pointed to her own neck. It looks like a burn scar or something. Gabriel closed his eyes. Matthew had exactly a scar like that, the result of a small household accident when he was 2. He had bumped into a hot pan and burned himself. The mark had remained forever. Sir, do you know this boy? Lucy's voice was filled with concern. Gabriel opened his eyes. I don't know. Maybe. I need to be sure. He looked at the sleeping boy. Can I see that scar? Lucy nodded and carefully moved the blanket aside and gently pulled down the collar of the boy's t-shirt. There, on the left side of his neck, was a small, irregular scar. Exactly like Matthew's. Exactly in the same place. Gabriel felt his legs go weak. He had to lean against the wall. The world spun around him. Could it be possible? After 5 years of searching, of investigations that led nowhere, of sleepless nights, of tears shed in secret, could it be possible that his son was here, in this forgotten shack in the Bronx, being cared for by 2 poor girls who barely had enough to eat? Sir, are you feeling all right? Amanda ran to him. Gabriel took several deep breaths, trying to control himself. I'm fine. I just need a minute. He stepped out of the shack and walked a few feet until he could breathe properly. Mr. Oswald, who was still waiting nearby, approached. Everything okay, son? Gabriel looked at the older man. Oswald, do you have any idea where this boy might have come from? Did anyone see when he appeared? No, nobody saw. He just showed up here one night, wandering the streets. People tried to ask him, but he wouldn't talk. Seemed lost, scared. The girls started taking care of him because they have good hearts. And no one looked for him? No missing child posters, nothing? Around here, a lost kid is more common than it should be. Lots of abandoned children, runaways from shelters, or kids whose parents are in a bad way. We hear about some cases, but not all of them. Gabriel nodded. His mind was working at high speed. He needed to be sure. He couldn't just take the boy based on coincidences, however striking they were. He needed proof. He needed a DNA test. But at the same time, a voice inside him screamed that this was his son. Every fiber of his being recognized something in that boy. It was more than the scar, more than the muttered words, more than the approximate age. It was something visceral, instinctive, impossible to explain rationally. He returned to the shack and approached Celia. "Mrs. Celia, I need to ask you something. I'd like to take the boy for some more detailed tests at the hospital, blood work, scans, that sort of thing. Would that be possible?" Celia looked at him with trust. "If you think it's best for him, you can take him. We trust you, sir." Lucy came closer. "Can I go with you? He gets scared when he wakes up in a strange place." "Yes, you can. Both of you can come." Gabriel made a few more calls. He arranged for the boy to be taken that same afternoon to a private hospital where he had contacts. He asked them to prepare for a full battery of tests, including collecting a sample for a DNA test. He didn't tell anyone his suspicions. Not yet. Not until he was absolutely sure. As he was leaving to get his car and come back for the boy and the girls, his cell phone rang. It was Rebecca. "Where are you?" Her voice was cold and accusatory. "You disappeared this morning without any explanation. I have an important dinner tonight, and I need you to be here." "I had to deal with an urgent matter. I'll be home later." "What urgent matter is it that you can't tell me about?" Gabriel hesitated. Then he decided Rebecca would have to know at some point anyway. "I'm helping some people who need medical assistance." "Since when did you become a doctor?" The sarcasm was evident. "You have a company to run, Gabriel. You can't be playing savior to the poor." "I'm not playing, and I'm going to do what needs to be done. If you want to go to the dinner alone, go. I'll show up if I have time." He hung up before she could reply. He knew there would be trouble when he got home, but at that moment, none of it mattered. All that mattered was discovering the truth about that boy. All that mattered was the possibility, however impossible it seemed, that his son was alive. Gabriel returned to the shack with his car. He helped the boy, still weak, into the back seat, where Lucy and Amanda settled in beside him. Celia stayed home as she was still too frail to go out. Mr. Oswald promised to keep an eye on her. During the drive to the hospital, Gabriel watched in the rearview mirror as the boy slept, leaning on Lucy's shoulder. And with every mile driven, the certainty grew inside him. That was Matthew, his son, alive. Against all odds, against all logic, against all the years of despair. Alive. But how? How had he ended up in the Bronx? What had happened during these 5 years? Where had he been? Who had taken care of him or who had mistreated him? And why didn't he speak? The questions piled up without answers, but one thing Gabriel knew for sure. It didn't matter what the test said. It didn't matter what any test proved or failed to prove. Something fundamental inside him already knew the truth. That boy was his son, and he would move heaven and earth to bring him back. Holy Cross Hospital was one of New York's most renowned medical institutions. Its gleaming white walls, marble floors, and state-of-the-art equipment contrasted sharply with the wooden shack Gabriel had left a few hours earlier. When the car stopped at the private emergency entrance, Lucy and Amanda got out with wide eyes, as if they had stepped onto another planet. An older boy, who was in the front seat next to Gabriel, also got out. It was Peter, Gabriel's 13-year-old son with Rebecca. The entrepreneur had decided to pick him up from school before going to the hospital. He wanted Peter to meet the girls and, in a way, wanted his legitimate son to be present at a moment that could change everything. Peter was a quiet, introspective boy. He had straight brown hair, glasses, and a perpetually serious expression. He spent most of his time locked in his room playing video games or reading science fiction books. He had few friends at the expensive private school he attended, and his relationship with his mother was distant. With Gabriel there was more closeness, but the entrepreneur recognized that he worked too much and didn't give his son the time he deserved. Gabriel carried the sick boy in his arms, while Lucy and Amanda followed beside them, still dazed by the environment. Peter walked behind, observing everything with restrained curiosity. A medical team was already waiting at the entrance, previously alerted by Gabriel. They quickly placed the boy on a wheeled stretcher and took him to a private room. Gabriel followed everything closely, giving instructions, authorizing procedures, signing documents. Lucy didn't move an inch from the boy's side, holding his hand even as the doctors tried to examine him. "Doctor, He gets scared when he wakes up and doesn't see me, she explained to the attending physician. Can I stay here? The doctor looked at Gabriel, who nodded. You can stay, but stay over here, out of the way of the procedures. Over the next few hours, the boy underwent a battery of tests: X-rays, ultrasound, MRI, complete blood work, a neurological evaluation. Gabriel had requested absolutely everything possible, and among the vials of blood collected, one was set aside specifically for the DNA test. Gabriel had discreetly provided his own sample in a separate room. Now all they had to do was wait. The DNA result would take at least 48 hours, the doctor explained, but all the other test results would be ready by the end of the day. In the meantime, the boy was settled into a comfortable private room, with a modern hospital bed, a television, his own bathroom, and even a sofa bed where Lucy could sleep if she wanted. Amanda and Peter were taken to the hospital cafeteria by a nurse, while Gabriel and Lucy remained in the room with the boy. He slept, finally at peace, free from the fever, clean for the first time in weeks after the nurses had given him a careful bath. Gabriel observed every detail of that face: the broad forehead, the shape of the nose, the curve of the mouth, the line of the jaw. Everything seemed to scream Matthew to him. But was it really him? Or was he just projecting his desperate wishes onto a child who happened to have some similarities? Sir, can I ask you a question? Lucy's voice interrupted his thoughts. Gabriel turned to her. You can. Why are you doing all this for us? We're nobody to you. And there must be a lot of people who need help out there. Why us? Gabriel took a deep breath. It was a fair question. I can't explain it well. When I saw you in the pharmacy yesterday, something inside me recognized your situation. I've been through it. I was poor like you. I've been hungry. I've needed help and didn't get it. Maybe that's all it is. Or maybe it's something more. He paused, looking at the boy again. You know, I had a son. He disappeared 5 years ago. He was 3 at the time. I never found out what happened to him. The police investigated. I hired private detectives, offered a reward. Nothing. It's like he vanished from the planet. Lucy was silent, absorbing the information. After a moment, she asked quietly, Do you think this boy could be your son? Gabriel looked at her. The girl was smarter than she looked. I don't know. Maybe he is. Maybe he isn't. But some things match up too well. The age, the scar, the words he mutters. I had a test done to be sure. In 2 days I'll know. And if it is him, then my whole life will make sense again. Gabriel felt his voice break. Then I'll get back the only thing that really matters and that I thought I'd lost forever. Lucy looked at the sleeping boy. And if it's not, then I'll help you all the same. Because he's a child who needs help. And you are 2 brave girls who deserve a better chance at life. The door to the room opened and Amanda ran in, holding a chocolate bar. Peter followed behind her, hands in his pockets. Uncle Gabriel, the lady at the cafeteria let us pick whatever we wanted. It was so cool. Gabriel smiled. That's great. Did you eat well? We did. And Peter showed me some games on his phone. Peter shrugged, a little embarrassed. She'd never seen a video game before. I thought it was interesting. Gabriel looked at his son with a mixture of pride and surprise. Peter rarely showed interest in other people. He was always so closed off in his own world. Seeing the boy interacting with Amanda, even shyly, was unusual. The hours passed. In the late afternoon, the doctor returned with the test results. He called Gabriel out of the room and explained everything in detail. The boy is recovering well from the infection. His lungs are clear, no lasting damage, but he shows clear signs of chronic malnutrition, which indicates he went hungry for a prolonged period. There are also old scars from burns and cuts that suggest he may have suffered some form of neglect or even abuse. Gabriel felt rage boil inside him. If that boy was really Matthew, who had done that to him? Who had hurt him? There's one more thing, the doctor continued. The neurological exam showed no physical damage to the brain that would explain why he doesn't speak. The mutism appears to be psychological, a result of trauma. I'm going to recommend he see a child psychologist who specializes in trauma. Do whatever is necessary. Gabriel authorized everything without hesitation. When he returned to the room, he found a scene that touched him deeply. The boy had woken up and was sitting up in bed. Peter was beside him, showing him something on his phone. Amanda and Lucy were watching, laughing at something. It was an image of normality that Gabriel hadn't seen in a long time. Children just being children. He approached, slowly, not wanting to break the moment. The boy looked up and saw him. For a second, their eyes met, and then the boy did something that paralyzed Gabriel. He held out his arms, in the universal gesture of a child wanting to be held. Gabriel didn't think. He simply walked over, picked the boy up and hugged him. The boy snuggled against his chest, as if it were the most natural place in the world. And there, in that embrace, Gabriel felt something click into place inside him. It was as if a part that had been missing for 5 years had finally returned. Lucy and Amanda exchanged emotional glances. Peter watched his father with a confused expression, as if he were seeing a stranger. Gabriel let the boy stay in his arms for long minutes, until he fell asleep again. Then, he carefully placed him back in the bed and covered him with the sheet. It was getting dark when Gabriel finally decided he needed to go home. He left Lucy at the hospital to stay with the boy overnight, gave her money for dinner at the cafeteria, and instructed the medical staff to provide whatever she needed. Amanda went with him and Peter, as she was too young to spend the night alone at the hospital. On the way, they dropped Amanda back at the shack. Celia was better thanks to the medicine Dr. Moore had sent. She was relieved to know the boy was being well cared for and that Lucy would be with him. Then Gabriel finally headed to his mansion in Greenwich. Peter was quiet in the passenger seat, clearly processing everything he had seen that day. Finally, he broke the silence. "Dad, do you really think that boy could be Matthew?" Gabriel kept his eyes on the road. "I do. A lot of things add up, but I'll know for sure in 2 days. And if it is him, what will happen? I'll bring him home, where he always should have been. And his mother, Mariana. I'll have to contact her. She lives in London now, but that's a matter for after, I'm sure." Peter fell silent again. Then he asked, "And the girls, Lucy and Amanda? What about them? They took care of him all this time. They saved him. We can't just take him and disappear, right?" Gabriel looked at his son with surprise and respect. Peter was right. Those girls had done more for that boy than anyone. They had shared their own food when they barely had enough for themselves. They had given him shelter when they themselves lived in miserable conditions. They had risked their own safety to get medicine for him. "You're right, I'll have to think of something." When they arrived at the mansion, Rebecca was waiting for them in the main living room. She was dressed in an expensive tailored suit, perfectly made up, with jewelry glittering at her neck and wrists. Her expression was one of controlled fury. "You missed the dinner," she said in an icy voice. "I had to go alone and make lame excuses to the Mendonças about where my husband was." "I told you I might not make it," Gabriel replied calmly, taking off his jacket. "And where exactly were you that was so important? Who are these people you're abandoning your obligations for?" Gabriel looked at Peter. "Go to your room, son. I need to talk to your mother." Peter hesitated, but obeyed. When the boy went upstairs, Gabriel turned to Rebecca. "Let's go to my study." Inside the study, with the door closed, Gabriel told her everything. The encounter at the pharmacy, the girls, the sick boy, the visit to the Bronx, the impossible coincidences, the tests, the DNA test. Rebecca listened in silence, her expression growing harder and harder. When he finished, she exploded. "Have you lost your mind? You really think some stray kid who turned up in a slum is Matthew? Gabriel, Matthew is dead. It's past time you accepted that. He could be alive, and all the evidence points to it." "Evidence? A scar that half the kids in the world have?" Words muttered. "In a dream that you're interpreting the way you want." "That's not evidence, Gabriel. That's desperation." "Then let's wait for the DNA results. Then we'll know for sure." Rebecca paced back and forth, visibly agitated. "Even if, by some miracle, this boy really is Matthew, you can't just bring him here. He's spent 5 years God knows where. He doesn't talk. He's traumatized. He could have all sorts of problems." "He's my son," Gabriel said in a firm voice. If he's alive, I'm bringing him home no matter what it takes. And those girls, are you going to adopt them? Too? Turn our house into an orphanage? I'm going to help them. I haven't decided how yet, but I'm going to help them. Rebecca stopped pacing and faced Gabriel. You are putting strangers before your own family, before your son who is alive and well, right here, right now, before Peter. I'm not putting anyone before anyone. I'm doing what's right. Right for whom, Gabriel? For you? For your guilty conscience? She paused, her voice becoming lower and more venomous. Or are you trying to compensate for the fact that you've never gotten over your miserable past, that even with all this money you still see yourself as that poor abandoned boy? Gabriel felt anger rise, but he controlled himself. I'm not going to argue about this with you now. I'll wait for the test results. Then we'll see. Rebecca walked to the door, but before leaving she turned one last time. If you bring that boy into this house, you will destroy everything we've built. Our social life, our reputation, our family. I hope you're prepared for the consequences. She left, slamming the door. Gabriel was left alone in his study, the tension making his head throb. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and walked to the window. Outside, the illuminated gardens looked unreal in their perfection. Everything in his life was perfect from the outside. The mansion, the cars, the successful company, the beautiful wife, the intelligent son. But inside it was all empty. It always had been. Since Matthew disappeared, Gabriel had been living on autopilot. He worked, earned money, fulfilled social obligations, but none of it had any real meaning. It was like playing a role in a play. He went through the right motions, said the appropriate lines, but felt nothing. Until yesterday. Until he saw those two girls in the pharmacy. Until he looked into Lucy's desperate eyes and recognized something he thought he had lost forever, the ability to truly care. And now, with the possibility that Matthew was alive, for the first time in 5 years, Gabriel felt like he was truly living again. The next 2 days were a torture of anxiety. Gabriel visited the hospital 3 times a day. The boy was recovering well physically. He had gained some weight, the color had returned to his face, and he had even started to sit up in bed and eat, with more appetite. But he still didn't speak. He just looked around at everything with those deep, sad eyes. Lucy had practically not left his side. She slept on the sofa bed in the room, helped the nurses feed him, talked to him even without getting a response. Gabriel had arranged for new clothes for her and all the food she wanted. He also brought Amanda to visit several times, always accompanied by Peter, who surprisingly seemed to have struck up a friendship with the younger girl. Celia also came to the hospital, brought by Gabriel in his car. When she saw the conditions in which the boy was being treated, she cried with gratitude. The doctor examined her again and adjusted her medication. Gabriel was already thinking about long-term solutions for their housing, but he wanted to wait for the DNA results before making any definitive decisions. On the morning of the 3rd day, Gabriel's phone rang. It was Dr. Moore. The DNA results are in. I need you to come to my office. The doctor's tone of voice revealed nothing. Gabriel felt his heart pound. I'm on my way. He was in a meeting at his office, but he simply stood up and left, ignoring the protests of his partners. In the car, his hands were shaking so much he had trouble holding the steering wheel. 20 minutes later, he was in Dr. Moore's office. The doctor greeted him personally and led him to his private office. He closed the door and indicated a chair. Gabriel sat down, feeling like a condemned man awaiting his sentence. Dr. Moore opened a folder and took out some papers. He looked at Gabriel with a serious expression. Gabriel, the results are conclusive. I ran the test twice to be absolutely certain. And? Gabriel could barely breathe. The boy is your son. The DNA match is 99.9%. There is no room for doubt. That boy is Matthew Harrison. The world stopped. For a moment, Gabriel couldn't process the words. Then, suddenly, it all came crashing down on him at once. 5 years of pain, of searching, of guilt, of despair. And now, finally, the answer he had thought impossible. Matthew was alive. His son was alive. Gabriel lowered his face into his hands and wept. He wept as he hadn't wept since the day of the disappearance. He wept with relief, with happiness, with gratitude. He wept for all the lost years and for the impossible chance to get them back. Dr. Moore placed a hand on his shoulder, letting him release everything that had been dammed up inside him. When he finally managed to compose himself, Gabriel wiped his face and looked at the doctor. How? How did he end up in the Bronx? What happened in these 5 years? Only he can answer that. And for that, he needs to start speaking again. I'm going to refer him to the best child psychologist I know. She specializes in trauma and selective mutism. If anyone can help him find his voice again, it's her. Gabriel nodded. Do whatever is necessary. Money is no object. He paused. I need to tell his mother, Mariana. Yes, she has the right to know. But Gabriel, you need to be prepared. This boy has been through things we can't even imagine. The recovery will be long and difficult. I know, but he's alive. That's all that matters now. Gabriel left the office with the DNA test results securely tucked away. He got into his car and sat there for several long minutes just processing the reality. Matthew was alive. His son was alive. After 5 years, he finally had his son back. He picked up his phone and called Mariana in London. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon there. She answered on the third ring, her voice carrying the permanent sadness that had settled in her since the disappearance. Mariana, I need you to sit down. I have some news. And then he told her everything, from beginning to end. Mariana listened in silence, except for the sobs that began when Gabriel revealed the DNA results. When he finished, she was crying uncontrollably on the other end of the line. I have to see him. I need to get the next flight. I don't care what time. Come. But Mariana, he's different. He's been through a lot. He won't be like you, remember. I don't care. He's my son. Our son. I'll be there tomorrow. After hanging up, Gabriel drove straight to the hospital. He entered the room where Matthew was. The boy looked at him and again held out his arms. Gabriel picked him up and hugged him tightly, this time knowing with absolute certainty who this child was. Welcome back, my son. Welcome back. Mariana's arrival was marked by an emotional storm that shook everyone involved. She landed at JFK Airport the next morning, after a red-eye flight from London. Gabriel was waiting for her at international arrivals, anxious and at the same time apprehensive about how her reunion with Matthew would be. When Mariana walked through the arrival gates, Gabriel almost didn't recognize her. The vibrant, life-filled woman he had known had transformed into a pale, fragile version of herself. At 38, she looked 50. Her blonde hair was shorter and dull. Deep, dark circles marked her face. She had lost so much weight that her clothes seemed to hang off her frame. But her eyes, those light brown eyes that Matthew had inherited, shone with an intensity Gabriel hadn't seen in years. They greeted each other with a brief, awkward hug. The divorce had been traumatic, each blaming the other for the carelessness that led to Matthew's disappearance. Mariana had never forgiven Gabriel for not going on that trip. Gabriel had never forgiven Mariana for taking her eyes off the boy at the crucial moment. But now, faced with the impossibility of having their son back, old grievances seemed too small to matter. In the car on the way to the hospital, Mariana asked 1,000 questions. How was he found? Who took care of him? Is he okay? Does he remember me? Gabriel answered everything he knew, which wasn't much. He also carefully prepared her for what she would find. Matthew was no longer the smiling 3-year-old. He was a traumatized, silent child who had been through things they were only beginning to imagine. When they entered the hospital room, Lucy was helping Matthew eat some oatmeal. The boy was sitting up in bed wearing a clean hospital gown. His hair had been cut and properly washed. He looked much better than when Gabriel had first seen him, but there was still that shadow of deep sadness in his eyes. Matthew looked up when he heard the door open. He saw Gabriel, and a small smile appeared on his face. Then his eyes moved to the woman beside Gabriel. He froze. The spoon stopped mid-air. His eyes widened in recognition, fear, and something that looked like desperate hope. Mariana let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. Her legs gave out and she had to lean on the door frame, "Matthew," she whispered. "My baby." She crossed the room with trembling steps and knelt beside the bed. Her hands shook so much she could barely raise them. When she finally touched her son's face, they both began to cry. Matthew threw himself into his mother's arms, and Mariana held him as if she would never let go again. Deep sobs racked both their bodies. Gabriel watched the scene with tear-filled eyes. Lucy discreetly left the room, giving them privacy for that moment. For long minutes, mother and son remained embraced, 5 years of pain and longing pouring out in tears. When they finally separated a little, Mariana held Matthew's face in her hands and looked at him with a hungry intensity, as if wanting to memorize every detail. "You've grown so much. You're so big." Her voice was choked with sobs. "Mommy looked for you for so long. Mommy never gave up on you." Matthew said nothing, but his eyes spoke volumes. He touched his mother's face with his small hand, as if also making sure she was real. Then, for the first time in weeks, he tried to speak. His mouth moved, forming a word that came out as a hoarse, broken whisper. "Mama." Mariana sobbed even harder. "Yes, my love. It's Mommy. I'm here. I'll never leave you again." Gabriel stepped out of the room to give them space. In the hallway, he found Lucy sitting in a chair, wiping her own eyes. The girl looked up at him. "Is she his real mom?" "She is. They were separated for 5 years. Today is their reunion." Lucy nodded slowly. "So he's going to leave with her now?" Gabriel sat down beside her. "It will take a while. He still needs to recover fully. And there's a lot that needs to be sorted out. But yes, eventually he'll live with one of us." He paused. "Lucy, you and your sister saved my son. I have no words to thank you for what you did. We just did what was right. Anyone would have." "No, Lucy, not everyone would have. You shared your food when you yourselves were starving. You gave him shelter when you barely had a roof over your own heads. You risked yourselves to get medicine for him. That's not just anyone. That's character, and I will never forget it." Lucy was speechless. Then she asked shyly, "And now? What's going to happen to us?" "I'm going to take care of you. I don't know exactly how yet, but I will make sure that you, your sister, and your mother have a better life. It's the least I can do." In the hours that followed, while Mariana stayed with Matthew, Gabriel spoke at length with Lucy. He wanted to know more about how they found the boy, what it was like taking care of him, if he had said or done anything that could give clues about where he had been. Lucy told him everything she knew, which unfortunately wasn't much. Matthew had simply appeared, wandering the streets of the Bronx. He was dirty, in torn clothes, apparently lost. She had started giving him food, and he kept coming back. After a few days, when a cold night approached, she brought him into the shack. He never spoke of where he came from or what had happened to him. Gabriel also asked about their lives, about Lucy's dreams, what she wanted to be when she grew up. The girl spoke shyly about liking school, but having to miss it a lot, to work and help her mother. She talked about wanting to be a teacher one day, to help other children like her. Gabriel listened attentively, forming plans in his mind. Late in the afternoon, Gabriel had to return to his mansion. He left Mariana at the hospital, where she insisted on spending the night with Matthew. Before leaving, he spoke with her privately in the hallway. "We need to talk about logistics. Where will Matthew stay when he gets out of the hospital?" Mariana wiped her eyes, swollen from crying. "I'll rent an apartment here in New York. I'm not going back to London without him. You can stay at the mansion. There are plenty of spare rooms." Mariana shook her head. "With you and your new wife?" "No, Gabriel. That would be uncomfortable for everyone. Besides," she paused, "when Matthew is ready, I want to take him back to London with me. I have good psychiatric support there, a quieter life. It will be better for him." Gabriel felt a pang of panic. "Wait, you want to take him out of the country? We've just found him." "I'm not saying now, but eventually, yes. He needs stability, Gabriel. He needs a full-time mother. You have a company to run, a new family. I only have him." "He's my son too, Mariana. I spent the same 5 years looking for him." "I know. And we'll have to come to an agreement about custody. But not today. Today, let's just be grateful to have him back. The difficult decisions can wait. Gabriel didn't like the conversation, but he agreed it wasn't the time for fights. He left the hospital with a heavy heart. Had he recovered Matthew only to face the possibility of losing him again to another country? When he arrived at the mansion, tension awaited him. Rebecca was in the living room, accompanied by a woman Gabriel didn't know. She was a stern-looking lady, dressed formally with an executive briefcase beside her. "Gabriel, this is Dr. Sylvia, a lawyer specializing in family law. I thought it prudent to consult her about the situation." Gabriel looked from Rebecca to the lawyer. "What situation?" "The situation with the boy you claim is your missing son," Rebecca said coldly. "I don't claim. I have the DNA test to prove it." Dr. Sylvia stood up. "Mr. Harrison, your wife hired me to advise you on the legal implications of bringing a child who has been missing for 5 years and was found under questionable circumstances into your home." "Questionable circumstances?" Gabriel felt his anger rise. "My son was found. Period. With all due respect, there are complex legal issues involved. Custody needs to be regularized. The biological mother's situation needs to be considered. And there's also the matter of the children who found him. Your wife informed me that you're considering helping them financially." "I am going to help them. They saved my son." "That's admirable, but it could create legal complications. If you provide significant financial support to these children, there could be questions about your intentions, especially if their mother decides to claim something more." Gabriel looked at Rebecca in disbelief. "Are you suggesting that sick woman and those girls are trying to extort me?" Rebecca stood up. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm being cautious. You've known these people for a few days, Gabriel. You know nothing about them. I know they're good people. I know they took care of my son when he had no one else. Or maybe they knew who he was from the beginning and were waiting for the right moment to approach you." Gabriel was stunned by the accusation. "Do you really believe that?" "I believe you're emotionally compromised and not thinking clearly." Gabriel took a deep breath, trying to control himself. "Dr. Sylvia, I appreciate your concern, but I won't be needing your services. My situation with my son is clear. He's alive, he's been identified by DNA, and he's coming home as soon as he's recovered. As for the girls who helped him, I will reward them appropriately, and I will not tolerate any suggestions that they have ulterior motives." The lawyer gave a slight nod. "I understand, but if you change your mind, I am at your disposal." She picked up her briefcase and left, escorted to the door by Rebecca. When she returned, Rebecca faced Gabriel. "You're making a mistake." "The only mistake I made was not seeing who you really are sooner," Gabriel replied coldly. "My son is alive. It's a miracle. And all you can do is look for problems where none exist. I'm trying to protect our family. Matthew is my family. He always has been. And me and Peter, are we not your family?" "You are. But that doesn't mean I have to choose. I can take care of everyone." Rebecca laughed bitterly. "You're so naive. You think you can just bring this traumatized boy here and everything will magically work out? You think your ex-wife will just agree to share custody? You think these poor girls will just take your money and disappear? I don't want them to disappear. I want to help them have a better life. And how exactly do you plan to do that? Are you going to support them for the rest of their lives? Pay for private school, university, housing, for how long, Gabriel? For as long as it takes." Rebecca shook her head. "You're going to ruin everything we've built. Our social standing, our life. People will talk. Can you imagine the scandal when they find out your missing son was found living in a slum?" "Let them talk. I don't care what people think." "But I do," she practically screamed. "I have a reputation to maintain. I have friends, social commitments, an image. Then maintain your image. But don't ask me to abandon my son or the people who saved him for the sake of social appearances." The silence that followed was thick with resentment. Finally, Rebecca spoke in a low, dangerous voice. "If you bring that boy into this house, you'll have to choose. It's either him or me." Gabriel stared at her. "Then I think you have your answer." Rebecca turned pale. "Are you telling me to leave?" "I'm telling you I won't choose between my son and you. If you can't accept Matthew, then maybe you should rethink whether you want to stay in this marriage." She took a step back, shocked. Then, without another word, she went upstairs. Gabriel heard the door to their bedroom slam shut. He went to his study and poured himself a generous glass of whiskey. His life was falling apart and rebuilding itself at the same time. He had recovered a son he thought he had lost forever, but he was losing his wife, perhaps his marriage, and would face a legal battle with Mariana over custody. And he still needed to find out what had really happened to Matthew in those 5 years. The next day, Gabriel woke up early and went straight to the hospital. He found Mariana and Matthew having breakfast together. The boy was eating better, and there was even a little color in his cheeks. When he saw Gabriel, he smiled shyly. "Good morning, champ." Gabriel approached and ruffled the boy's hair. "How did you sleep?" Matthew didn't answer verbally, but he gave a thumbs-up gesture that made Gabriel laugh. It was progress. The psychologist Dr. Moore had recommended was coming to visit him that morning. Dr. Beatrice Costa was a woman in her 50s, specializing in child trauma. When she arrived, she asked to speak with Gabriel and Mariana privately before meeting Matthew. "You need to understand that the road to recovery will be long. Psychological mutism is a response to trauma. Matthew will speak again when he feels safe enough. Forcing him will only make it worse. We need to create an environment where he feels he can express himself without fear." She spent nearly 2 hours with Matthew, using play therapy, drawings, and toys to establish communication. When she came out, she seemed optimistic. "He's intelligent and is starting to trust. I'll visit him 3 times a week initially. I also recommend that when he leaves the hospital, he has a very structured and predictable routine. Traumatized children need stability." Meanwhile, at the mansion, Peter was having his own revelations. He had asked his father if he could take Amanda to visit his school one day, just to show her what it was like. Gabriel had agreed, thinking it would be good for both of them. When Amanda saw the expensive private school where Peter studied, her eyes widened. It was a completely different world from hers. Air-conditioned classrooms, new computers, a huge library, sports courts, a swimming pool. Peter showed her everything with a mix of pride and discomfort, seeing his own life through the eyes of someone who had never had any of it. "You're so lucky," Amanda said sincerely. "I wish I could study in a place like this." Peter was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'd never thought about it before. That I was lucky, I mean. I always thought it was normal. Your school is like a castle. Mine has leaks, we're short on teachers, and sometimes there's not even lunch." That hit Peter in a way he hadn't expected. He spent the rest of the day thinking about it. That night, he went to his father's study. "Dad, can I talk to you?" Gabriel was finishing some emails but closed his laptop. "Of course, son, have a seat." Peter hesitated before speaking. "It's about Amanda and Lucy. Are you really going to help them?" "I am. Why?" "Because I think you should. They're nice, and they've been through a lot. Amanda told me that sometimes they go days eating nothing but bread and eggs, and that their mom sometimes coughs up blood." Gabriel felt his chest tighten. "I'll take care of it. I'll make sure they have what they need." Peter bit his lip. "I was thinking, what if they came to live here?" Gabriel raised his eyebrows, surprised. "Here, in the mansion?" "Yeah, there are a bunch of empty rooms, and then Amanda could go to a good school, and Lucy too, and their mum could live here and work if she wanted to." "That's a very kind thought, son, but your mother wouldn't like that idea." "I know, she already doesn't like Matthew coming here. But Dad," Peter looked directly into Gabriel's eyes, "if we can help and we don't, aren't we kind of guilty too?" Gabriel felt both pride and sadness. His 13-year-old son was showing more compassion and maturity than many adults. "You're right, son. I'll think of something." But things were about to get more complicated. The next day, a woman showed up at the hospital looking for Celia. She introduced herself as Marlene, Celia's older sister. The two had been estranged for years, since a family fight over inheritance when their parents passed away. Marlene was very different from Celia. She dressed flashily, in tight clothes and excessive makeup. She wore jewelry that looked expensive but was fake. She had a calculating air that immediately put Gabriel on alert. She hugged Celia with theatrical effusiveness. "Sis, when I heard you were sick and the girls were struggling, I came running. Family has to help family." Celia seemed uncomfortable. "Marlene, I haven't heard from you in 5 years. What do you want?" "I want to help my sister and my nieces, of course. I heard some rich man is paying for everything." She looked at Gabriel with interest. "That must be you, right?" Gabriel just nodded, not liking this woman at all. Marlene continued. "Well, now that I'm here, I'll take responsibility for the girls. After all, I'm bloodkin. I could even apply for custody if Celia can't. Take care of them." Lucy, who was present, turned pale. "We don't want to live with you, Aunt Marlene. We're staying with Mom." Marlene gave a fake smile. "You're too young to understand, dear. But when the adults talk, they'll see I'm right." Gabriel intervened. "You just showed up after 5 years. It doesn't seem like you have much genuine interest in the girls." Marlene glared at him. "And who are you to talk about my family? Just because you have money?" "I'm someone who actually cares, and I'm going to make sure these girls stay safe. We'll see what the courts have to say about that," Marlene retorted. "I have rights as their aunt, and I'm sure a judge would rather they stay with blood relatives than with some rich stranger who appeared out of nowhere." She left the room with a satisfied smirk, leaving everyone worried. Gabriel knew that trouble was just beginning. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions, revelations, and conspiracies that intertwined in increasingly complex ways. Gabriel felt like a juggler trying to keep multiple balls in the air at once, knowing that if he dropped any one of them, the consequences would be devastating. Matthew was discharged from the hospital after 10 days. The doctors considered him physically recovered enough to continue his treatment at home. The malnutrition was being reversed, the respiratory infection was completely cured, and he had gained 7 pounds. But his emotional recovery was still in its early stages. Although he had started muttering a few single words again, mainly to Mariana, he still didn't speak fluently. And whenever someone asked about the 5 years he was missing, he would shut down completely, his face taking on a distant, frightened expression. Dr. Beatrice worked with him daily, using art and play therapy. Gradually, Matthew began to express fragments of memories through his drawings. He drew a blue car several times. He drew mountains. He drew a house with bars on the windows. He drew a woman with long hair who wasn't Mariana. And in one particularly disturbing drawing, he illustrated a child locked in a dark room. The psychologist brought the drawings to Gabriel and Mariana in a private meeting. Based on what he's expressing artistically, I believe Matthew was held captive somewhere in the mountains, possibly an isolated house. The recurring female figure could be someone who kept him prisoner. The drawings suggest isolation, fear, and loneliness. Mariana covered her mouth with her hand, trying to stifle her sobs. My God! My baby was kidnapped and held prisoner all this time. Gabriel clenched his fists. Who would do this? And why? If it were for ransom, they would have contacted us. If it were trafficking, he wouldn't be here. What happened? Dr. Beatrice placed her hand gently on the table. Eventually, he will be able to tell us, but it has to be in his own time. Forcing him could cause more trauma. For now, the important thing is that he feels safe and loved. Gabriel hired a private investigator, the best he could find. He gave him all of Matthew's drawings, the few words the boy had muttered, and asked him to investigate all possibilities. He had to find out where his son had been and who was responsible for taking him. Meanwhile, the situation at the mansion had become unbearable. Rebecca and Gabriel barely spoke. She slept in a separate room and spent her days out, supposedly with friends, but Gabriel suspected she was consulting with divorce lawyers. Peter was caught in the middle, clearly uncomfortable, with the tension between his parents. It was on one of these tense afternoons that Gabriel made a decision. He gathered Mariana, who was temporarily staying in a nearby hotel with Matthew, and the girls with Celia, who were also in hotel rooms he was paying for. He invited them all to dinner at a neutral restaurant where they could talk calmly. Celia was visibly better. With the right medication and proper nutrition, her cough had significantly decreased, and she had regained some weight. Lucy and Amanda wore new clothes Gabriel had bought them, and looked like different girls, though they still retained an air of caution from not being used to so much kindness. Gabriel waited until everyone was settled and had ordered. Then he began to speak. "I've brought you all here because we need to make some important decisions. Over the past few days, I've been thinking a lot about how to move forward." He looked at each of them. "Matthew needs stability. Lucy and Amanda deserve a chance at a better life, and Mrs. Celia needs proper conditions to recover completely." Everyone listened in silence. Gabriel continued, "I've purchased a property. It's a spacious house in a quiet, safe neighborhood. It has 5 bedrooms, a garden, a garage. I thought you could all live there." Mariana's eyes widened. "Gabriel, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about giving Matthew a home where he can be close to you, to me, and to the girls who took care of him. A neutral place, not my mansion or your hotel. A place that is his." "Sir," Celia said in a trembling voice, "I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not too much. It's the minimum." Gabriel was firm. "Mrs. Celia, your daughters saved my son. They did. For him what I couldn't do for 5 years. How could I not repay that?" Lucy looked at her mother, then at Gabriel. "What about Aunt Marlene? She said she was going to fight for custody." "I've already spoken with my lawyers about that," Gabriel replied. "Marlene has no strong legal basis to get custody. She abandoned you for 5 years. Besides, I found out some things about her. She has a history of fraud and debt. A judge would never grant custody of children to someone like that." Amanda brightened up for the first time. "So we don't have to live with her?" "No, you're going to stay with your mother, and I'm going to help ensure you have everything you need." Mariana still looked confused. "Gabriel, this is very generous. But what about us? Matthew's custody?" Gabriel took a deep breath. "I have a proposal. How about we share custody in a civilized manner? You can live in this house with Matthew. I'll visit him every day. On weekends he can stay with me. The girls live there too with their mother, which will help Matthew maintain his connection with those who cared for him. And when he's more stable, then we can talk about the future more calmly." Mariana thought for a long moment. "And London? My life is there now." "I know, and I'm not asking you to give up your life. I'm just asking you to give Matthew time to recover here first, close to everyone who cares about him. Later, if you want to go back to London and he's well enough, we can work out an international custody agreement." "You would do that? Let him go to another country?" "If it's what's best for him, yes," Gabriel said sincerely. "I lost 5 years of his life. I'm not going to be selfish now and put my own desires above his well-being." Mariana felt her eyes well up. "You've changed, Gabriel. You're more human. Almost losing a child forever changes a person." The deal was sealed that night. In the following days, Gabriel arranged everything. He furnished the house tastefully but without extravagance. He hired a cook to come 3 times a week to prepare healthy meals. He found spots for Lucy and Amanda in a quality private school. Though not as ostentatious as Peter's, he provided uniforms, school supplies, everything they needed. He also regularized Celia's employment situation, formally hiring her as the house manager with a decent salary and full benefits. When Celia, Lucy, and Amanda entered the house for the first time, all 3 cried. They couldn't believe that this place would really be theirs. They each had their own room. There was a spacious living room, a modern kitchen, 2 full bathrooms, a laundry area, and a garden with green grass. It was a dream. Matthew also had one of the rooms, specially decorated for him with soft colors and age-appropriate toys. Mariana settled into the master bedroom, and there was still a guest room left over. The move was good for Matthew. Being away from the hospital environment and in a home that carried no bad memories helped him relax. He played in the garden with Lucy and Amanda, who treated him with protective affection. Mariana spent her days with him, reading stories, doing activities suggested by the psychologist, simply being present. Gabriel visited every day after work. He had dinner with everyone, helped Matthew with puzzles, and talked with the girls about how their new school was going. It was a dynamic unlike anything he had ever experienced, but he felt more whole than he had in years. Peter sometimes came along on the visits. He and Amanda had developed a genuine friendship. Peter taught her things, shared books, showed her games. Amanda, in turn, showed Peter a world he had never known, telling him stories of the inner city, of the daily struggle, of the strength it took to survive. But not everything was harmonious. Marlene hadn't given up. She started showing up at the house uninvited, always with some excuse. She said she just wanted to see her nieces, but her eyes were always sizing everything, up, calculating values, looking for opportunities. It was Lucy who first noticed what her aunt was doing. She took a necklace from Mum's room, Lucy told Gabriel in private. I saw her take it and put it in her purse. When I confronted her, she said it was hers, that Mom had stolen it from Grandma when she died. Gabriel was on alert. I'll talk to Mrs. Celia about this. The conversation revealed something disturbing. Celia confirmed the necklace was a family heirloom from their mother, and that she had kept it because she was the youngest daughter who had cared for their parents until the end. Marlene was always jealous of that. She always thought she deserved more of the inheritance because she was older, but our parents left everything divided equally. I just got the jewelry because she had already sold her share to pay off debts. Gabriel hired a lawyer to handle the matter. He also installed security cameras in the house, with everyone's consent, and it was a good thing he did. 2 weeks later, Marlene showed up again. This time, when she left, Celia noticed that a few small things were missing. A wall clock. Gabriel had given them. A decorative statuette. Some silver cutlery that came with the furnished house. Gabriel checked the cameras. There was Marlene, clearly visible, taking the objects and putting them in a large bag she had brought. He took the footage to the police and filed a report. When confronted, Marlene initially denied everything, but faced with the video evidence, she changed her tactics. She began to claim she was entitled to those things because she was taking care of her nieces. That Gabriel was a stranger trying to buy their affection, that she, as their blood aunt, deserved compensation for all the years Celia had the family's support, and she didn't. Gabriel's lawyer was ruthless. He sued Marlene for theft and filed for a restraining order preventing her from approaching the house or the girls. Marlene, furious and desperate, began to spread lies about Gabriel in the neighborhood. She said he was taking advantage of Celia, that he had ulterior motives with the girls, that the boy wasn't even his real son. It was a difficult time. But Gabriel and his lawyer had all the evidence they needed: the DNA test, the medical records, witness statements. Marlene had nothing but empty accusations. What Gabriel didn't know was that Marlene had found an unlikely ally, Rebecca. The two met by chance at a chic cafe on the Upper East Side. Rebecca was with friends, complaining bitterly about how her husband was throwing money away on strangers. Marlene, always on the lookout for opportunities, overheard the conversation and introduced herself. They discovered they had a common enemy, the situation Gabriel had created, and they decided to join forces. Rebecca provided Marlene with inside information about Gabriel's finances, the amounts he was spending on the new house, his future plans. Marlene, in turn, fed Rebecca distorted gossip about Gabriel's supposed inappropriate behavior with Mariana, suggesting that perhaps they were rekindling their romance. Together, they began to plot. Marlene would file a lawsuit claiming Gabriel was unduly interfering with her family and would try again to get custody of the girls, this time with lawyers paid for by Rebecca. Rebecca, simultaneously, would file for divorce, claiming emotional abandonment and mismanagement of the couple's assets. The plan was to destabilize Gabriel on all fronts at once, forcing him to negotiate favorable terms for both of them. Marlene wanted money. Rebecca wanted the larger share of the couple's assets and a generous alimony. But conspiracies have a way of unraveling when they are based on lies. The private investigator Gabriel had hired to find out what happened to Matthew had also been investigating Marlene as a precaution. And he discovered something explosive. Marlene wasn't just a person with a history of fraud. She was actively involved in an extortion scheme. She had done it before with other families, always using the same tactic. She would approach relatives in vulnerable situations, offer help, and then create situations to extort money or assets. Even more shocking, the investigator discovered that Marlene was in contact with Rebecca. He had photos of the two meeting at cafes, talking at length, exchanging documents. He had records of phone calls between them. Gabriel was stunned when he saw the evidence, his own wife conspiring with a criminal to harm him. The betrayal hurt more than he expected, even though he already knew the marriage was over. He took everything to his lawyer. "This is the kind of evidence that completely changes a divorce proceeding," the lawyer explained. "If she files for divorce claiming you're at fault, we can prove bad faith and conspiracy. She won't get anything more than what the law mandates." Gabriel nodded. "Prepare everything, and I want Marlene prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." But before taking legal action, Gabriel decided to confront Rebecca directly. He went to the mansion on a day he knew she would be there. He found her in the living room, looking over papers that appeared to be divorce documents. "Can we talk?" he asked calmly. Rebecca looked up. "There's nothing to talk about. I've made my decision. I'm filing for divorce." "I know. I also know you're conspiring. With Marlene." Rebecca turned pale. "What are you talking about?" Gabriel tossed an envelope onto the table. Inside were photos, transcripts of text messages the investigator had obtained, call logs, everything proving the conspiracy between them. Rebecca opened the envelope and quickly flipped through the contents. Her face went through several shades of white. "You were spying on me. I was protecting myself, and it's a good thing I did. This doesn't prove anything. We're just acquaintances. It proves you're plotting together to extort me. It proves you're allied with a known criminal. It proves bad faith." He paused. "Do you think a judge will give you anything after seeing this?" Rebecca threw the papers back on the table. "All this for a boy you're not even sure is your son." "I am sure. DNA doesn't lie, unlike you." The silence was heavy. Finally, Rebecca asked, "What do you want?" "I want a divorce, on fair terms. You get what's rightfully yours, I get what's mine. No ugly fights, no extortion attempts. And you cut off all contact with Marlene completely. And if I don't agree, then I'll sue you along with her and I'll fight for every penny. It won't be pretty, and you'll lose a lot more than if you accept my terms." Rebecca knew she was cornered. She agreed to the basic terms of the divorce. The mansion would go to Gabriel. She would receive alimony for 5 years, enough time to get established, and half of the assets acquired during the marriage. Custody of Peter would be shared, but the boy could choose who he wanted to live with most of the time. When Peter was consulted, he chose his father without hesitation. "I love Mom," he told Gabriel, "but I want to stay with you, and I want to be able to visit Matthew and the girls whenever I can." Gabriel hugged his son, proud of the person he was becoming. As for Marlene, justice took its course. She was prosecuted for theft, attempted extortion, and fraud. The evidence was irrefutable. She ended up accepting a plea deal where she would return everything she had stolen, pay a fine, and sign a commitment to never again approach Celia, Lucy, or Amanda. With these threats finally neutralized, life began to calm down. Matthew continued his therapy and made slow but steady progress. He began to speak. More first single words, then short sentences. He called Mariana Mom and Gabriel Dad. He played with Lucy and Amanda as if they were his sisters. And then, 3 months after he was found, something happened that would change everything. Matthew was drawing in the living room, as he often did during his sessions with Dr. Beatrice. But this time he drew something new, a license plate with clear numbers and letters. The psychologist showed the drawing to Gabriel. He remembers the license plate of the car that took him. This could be the key to finding out what happened. Gabriel immediately took the drawing to the investigator. He cross-referenced the data with vehicle records from the time of the disappearance, and he found something. A car with that license plate had been registered to a woman named Helena Rodriguez, who lived in a mountain town 4 hours from New York, the same region where Mariana and Matthew were when he disappeared. Gabriel felt his heart race. They finally had a concrete lead. They could finally find out the truth. The drive to the mountain town in the Catskills took 4 hours. Gabriel insisted on going personally, accompanied by the private investigator and 2 police officers who agreed to join the operation. Mariana wanted to come, but Gabriel convinced her to stay with Matthew. They didn't know what they would find, and it was better to keep the boy protected from any situation that could re-traumatize him. The town was small, surrounded by mountains covered in dense forest. Houses were scattered on the hillsides, with cobblestone streets and a cool, damp air that contrasted with the heat of New York City. It was exactly the kind of place that appeared in Matthew's drawings: mountains, isolation, coldness. The address registered for Helena Rodriguez was an old house on the outskirts of town, away from the center. When they arrived, they found a rusty gate, an overgrown garden, and a for sale sign nailed to the facade. The house was empty. Gabriel felt frustration tighten his chest. Were they too late? Had Helena fled? The investigator rang the doorbell of the house next door. An elderly woman answered, looking suspiciously at the group. "Can we ask you a few questions about the neighboring house?" the investigator asked, showing his professional ID. The woman relaxed a bit. "What do you want to know?" "We're looking for Helena Rodriguez. Do you know her?" "I do. Lived here for about 5 years. Strange woman, a loner, barely spoke to anyone. Had a little boy she said was her son, but nobody ever saw her pregnant. Then, about 3 months ago, she just disappeared. Left the house with a real estate agency to sell." Gabriel's blood ran cold. 3 months, exactly when Matthew had appeared in the Bronx. She had a boy? What was he like? Small, skinny, dark hair. Poor thing, always looked scared. Helena never let him go out to play with the other kids. Said he was sick, had to stay inside. We thought it was strange, but it wasn't our business, you know. Do you know where she went? No idea. One night everything was normal, the next the house was empty. The real estate agent said she mailed the keys and asked them to sell everything. Gabriel exchanged a look with the investigator. Helena had fled, but where? And why had she abandoned Matthew? The police got a warrant to enter the empty house. Inside, they found few remaining pieces of furniture. Old beds, a broken table, some kitchen utensils. But in one of the bedrooms, they discovered something that made Gabriel have to lean against the wall to keep from falling. It was a small room with bars on the windows, exactly as Matthew had drawn. The walls had pencil marks, scratches a child had made to count the days. Gabriel counted. There were hundreds of marks. His son had spent years locked in that room. The rage and pain were so intense he could barely breathe. Who was this woman? Why had she done this to an innocent child? The investigation deepened. Through bank records, they discovered that Helena had withdrawn all the money from her account 3 months ago and disappeared. There were no clues as to where she had gone, but there were clues about who she was. Helena Rodriguez was 52 years old. She was a woman with no family who had worked her entire life as a nurse in hospitals. She had never married, had no children, but she had a psychiatric history. She had been institutionalized twice for severe depression, one of which was after an episode where she tried to kidnap a baby from the maternity ward where she worked, claiming it was her son. She was fired and forced to undergo treatment. The investigator discovered more. 5 years ago, Helena was on vacation in that very mountain town when she crossed paths with Mariana and Matthew. Security camera footage from a supermarket at the time showed Helena watching Mariana and the boy from a distance, following them discreetly. Later, the footage showed Helena in the parking lot, waiting. The police managed to retrieve the original statements from the disappearance. Mariana had said she was carrying bags from the supermarket to the car. 3-year-old Matthew was by her side. She opened the trunk, turned to grab the bags, and when she looked again, Matthew was gone. It was a matter of seconds. Now, with the new evidence, the picture became clear. Helena had seized those seconds of distraction. She had taken Matthew, put him in her own car, and fled. A mentally disturbed woman who had always wanted a child and saw an opportunity to fulfill her sick desire. But why had she abandoned him 3 months ago? The answer came from medical records. Helena had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Doctors had given her only a few months to live. Knowing she was dying and could no longer care for Matthew, she had simply left him in New York in the Bronx and fled to a place where she could spend her final days. It was a disturbing story of madness, loneliness, and crime. Gabriel felt relief at knowing the truth, but also a deep rage for everything Helena had stolen from him and Matthew. 5 years. 5 years of a childhood locked in a room, away from his parents, without real love, without freedom. The police issued a nationwide arrest warrant for Helena Rodriguez for kidnapping, but Gabriel suspected they would never find her alive. Someone with terminal cancer who wanted to disappear had ways of ensuring they were never found. When he returned to New York, Gabriel met with Mariana privately and told her everything. She cried copiously, imagining her son's suffering, but she also felt a strange sense of relief. At least now they knew. At least now they understood why Matthew was the way he was. They decided not to tell Matthew the full details yet. Dr. Beatrice suggested they reveal things gradually, as he was ready. The important thing was that now they had answers to give him when he started to ask. The following months were a period of slow but steady healing. Matthew, knowing he was safe, began to open up more. He started speaking in full sentences again. He began to play with more joy. He still had nightmares sometimes, waking up screaming in the middle of the night. But Mariana was always there to soothe him, and Gabriel visited every morning before work to have breakfast with his son. The house became a true home. Celia, her health improved, cared for everyone with motherly dedication. She cooked, kept everything organized, and treated Matthew as if he were her own son. Lucy and Amanda thrived in their new school. Lucy discovered a talent for math and science, while Amanda revealed herself to be a natural artist, always drawing and painting. Gabriel enrolled Matthew in a special school for children who needed psychological support. There he had classes adapted to his pace, occupational therapy, and teachers trained to deal with trauma. Slowly, he began to make friends, relearning how to be a child. Peter visited frequently, forming a strong bond with his half-brother. They played together, Peter always patient, always kind. The whole experience had transformed Peter. He had gone from being an isolated boy to someone more empathetic, more aware of the world beyond his privileged bubble. Gabriel and Rebecca's divorce was finalized 6 months after their initial separation. Rebecca moved into a luxurious apartment that Gabriel helped pay for as part of the settlement. She kept in touch with Peter, but the two were not close. Peter had chosen to live with his father in the mansion, but spent some weekends with his mother. It was during one of these weekends, almost a year after Matthew was found, that Gabriel made an important decision. He gathered Mariana, Celia, and the girls in the living room of the house. Matthew was there too, now having recently turned 9, stronger, healthier, with the smile finally reaching his eyes. "I have some important things to say," Gabriel began. "This past year has been the most difficult and the most meaningful of my life. I got my son back. I met extraordinary people. I learned what family truly means." He looked at each of them. "Mariana, you are an incredible mother. Seeing you with Matthew, seeing the dedication and love you give him, makes me certain he's in good hands. I know you still think about going back to London, and I know that when the time comes I'll have to let him go with you part of the time. But I want to propose something different." Mariana tilted her head, curious. "What do you have in mind?" "I want to propose that we make this house Matthew's permanent home, that you stay here in New York. I know your life was in London, but here you have support. You have Celia helping. You have the girls whom Matthew loves like sisters. You have the whole structure, set up for his recovery." He paused. "And I know it's a lot to ask, but I'd like you to consider it." Mariana was silent, thinking. "Gabriel, you know I have my job in London, my friends." "I know, and I'm not asking you to abandon everything. I'm asking you to consider making New York your main base, at least until Matthew is fully recovered. Then we can reassess." Mariana looked at Matthew, who was watching her with those dark eyes so much like her own. "Do you want to stay here, love?" she asked softly. Matthew nodded. Say it here. I like Lucy and Amanda. I like Grandma Celia. I like seeing Dad every day." He called Celia Grandma, something that had come about naturally, and left the woman with teary eyes every time. Mariana smiled through her tears. "Then I'll stay. For you, my love, I'll stay." Gabriel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "Thank you. That means so much." He turned to Celia. "Mrs. Celia, I want to make something official. I want to put this house in your daughters' names. So they will have security, so they will never again go through what they went through. Celia covered her mouth, shocked. Mr. Gabriel, that's too much. I can't accept. You can and you will. Gabriel was firm but gentle. Your daughters saved my son. There is no gift big enough to repay that, but a safe home is the minimum. Furthermore, I want to pay for both of their college educations when the time comes. Lucy, you said you want to be a teacher. I'll make sure you get the best education possible. Amanda, you love art so much. We'll find the best art school for you when the time is right. Lucy and Amanda were crying openly. Thank you, Mr. Gabriel, Lucy whispered. We'll never forget what you've done for us. Don't thank me. You gave me my son back. I'm the one who will never be able to thank you enough. Matthew suddenly stood up and crossed the room. He hugged Gabriel tightly. I love you, Dad. Gabriel held him, feeling the tears finally fall. I love you too, son, so much. I'll never let anything bad happen to you again. The months continued to pass. Spring arrived, bringing flowers to the garden of the house. Matthew celebrated 1 year since he had been found. They had a small party with only the people who really mattered. Gabriel, Peter, Mariana, Celia, Lucy, Amanda, Dr. Beatrice, Dr. Moore, and Mr. Oswald, with whom Gabriel had made a point of staying in touch. During the party, Gabriel observed the scene around him. Peter was teaching Matthew how to play a video game. Amanda was showing her latest drawings to Mariana. Lucy was helping Celia bring the cake from the kitchen. Everyone was laughing, talking, simply being a family. It wasn't the family he had imagined having when he was young. It wasn't conventional. It didn't follow any traditional pattern. It was a patchwork quilt of people that life had brought together in unexpected ways. But it was real. It was based on true love, on sacrifice, on conscious choices to care. Dr. Beatrice approached him. How are you feeling, Gabriel? Complete, he answered honestly. For the first time in a long time, I feel complete. Matthew has made incredible progress. You must be very proud. I am. But not just of him, of everyone. Every person here contributed to this miracle. The psychologist smiled. You know, in the beginning when you showed up at my office with the story of the found boy who might be your son, I thought it would be another case of wishful thinking. But you proved that miracles happen. And more importantly, you proved that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who cares, who chooses to love. Gabriel nodded, emotional. That's exactly what I've learned. That night, after the guests had gone home and the children were asleep, Gabriel stood in the garden looking at the stars. Mariana came out and stood beside him. Thank you, she said softly, for not giving up on him, for continuing to search even when everyone said it was hopeless. Thank you for being the incredible mother you are, for giving him all the love he needed to heal. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Mariana asked, Do you still think about Helena? About what she did? Gabriel thought carefully before answering. I do. And I still feel anger. But I also feel a strange kind of pity. She was a sick, broken person who made terrible decisions. I don't justify what she did, I never will, but I understand that she was a very disturbed woman who caused pain because she herself was in pain. You're more generous than I am. I can only feel anger. That's natural, and you have every right. She stole 5 years from you with your son. And from you too. Yes, but look what those lost 5 years brought us. They brought Lucy and Amanda into our lives. They brought Celia. They brought lessons about compassion, about humility, about what really matters. I wouldn't trade having Matthew back for anything, but I'm grateful for the people this journey put in our path. Mariana put her hand on his arm. You've changed a lot, Gabriel, for the better. Life changes us, especially when it forces us to confront what really matters. 3 years had passed since that day in the pharmacy. Matthew was now 11 and completely different from the scared, silent boy who had been found. He was a smart, curious kid who loved soccer and video games. He still went to therapy, but the nightmares were rare now. He had friends at school. He laughed easily. He was just a normal kid with an extraordinary story in his past. Lucy was 16, a brilliant young woman who had just won a full scholarship to a special program for gifted students. She already knew she wanted to study education. Amanda, at 13, was enrolled in an art school and had already sold some of her paintings at local exhibitions. Celia, completely recovered from her respiratory illness, worked happily taking care of the house and everyone she loved. Peter was also 16, mature beyond his years. He had developed an interest in architecture and was already interning at his father's company during his vacations. His relationship with Rebecca had improved slightly, though it would never be close. But he was at peace with it. Gabriel, now 50, had shifted the focus of his company. In addition to construction, he had created a foundation dedicated to helping vulnerable families, especially those with missing children. He used his resources to fund searches, provide psychological support, and help with the reintegration of found children. It was his way of paying forward the miracle he had received. On a special Saturday, Gabriel hosted a barbecue at the mansion. He invited everyone. The house remained the official home of Matthew, Mariana, Celia, and the girls, but the mansion was the place for family gatherings. As the meat grilled and the kids played in the pool, Gabriel watched. Matthew and Peter were playing soccer with some friends. Lucy and Amanda were talking animatedly with Mariana about college. Celia was laughing at a joke Mr. Oswald was telling. This was his family, not the one he was born with, not the one he had planned to have, but the one life had given him through impossible circumstances, difficult choices, and unconditional love. He thought about his journey, from the poor boy in the Bronx to the successful entrepreneur, from the devastating loss of a son to the impossible miracle of his recovery, from the lessons learned about what truly constituted wealth. True wealth wasn't in the buildings he had built, it wasn't in the mansion, the cars, the bank account. It was right there, in that moment, in the laughter of children, in the hug of a recovered son, in the silent gratitude of a mother who had seen her daughters get a chance at a better future, in the love that needed no words to be felt. Matthew got out of the pool and ran to him, dripping water. "Dad, come play soccer with us." "Come play." Gabriel smiled. "I'm coming, son." As he walked towards the lawn, Matthew took his hand. The small hand he thought he would never hold again, the hand that had been cared for by two brave girls in a shack in the Bronx, the hand that represented a miracle. "Love you, Dad," Matthew said naturally, as if he said it 1,000 times a day, which, in a way, he did. "I love you too, champ, more than you can ever imagine." And there, surrounded by everyone he loved, Gabriel Harrison finally understood the true meaning of being home. It wasn't a place. It was a feeling. It was knowing that no matter what happened, he had people by his side who chose to love him, and whom he had chosen to love back. Years earlier, a simple gesture in a pharmacy had changed the course of many lives. A decision to pay for medicine for two unknown girls had set off a chain of events that seemed impossible. But they weren't. They were just proof that sometimes, when we open our hearts to help without expecting anything in return, the universe gives us back more than we could ever imagine. Gabriel had recovered a son, but he had gained so much more. He had gained an extended family. He had gained a renewed purpose. He had gained the certainty that kindness matters, that compassion transforms, that love, in all its forms, is the most powerful force there is. As he played soccer with the boys, hearing laughter all around, feeling the warmth of the afternoon sun, Gabriel smiled. His journey had been long and painful, but destiny, finally, had brought him home, to the only place that truly mattered, the place where he was loved, the place where he belonged, the place where at last he was complete.